Where I grew up, nobody ever talked about Jesus. I often wondered, but it's something that I always kept to myself. I suppressed the urge for something bigger, and instead I just lived day to day. Who cared about the consequences? Life was just one big party. One day, surrounded by booze and drugs, laying in the empty, pointless routine I called my life, I realized how quickly time had passed, and in my quest to really live, I had been avoiding reality altogether. I was neglecting relationships, I was totally withdrawn, and I was exhausted. I knew there was a better life for me, but I felt trapped in the world that I had created, and I had no idea how to escape.
Being a single mom can bring a lot of challenges with it. I have to be the nurturer and the discipliner, and that can bring a lot of stress to a family.
I love my mom, but I didn't always appreciate what she was trying to do. Small, pointless arguments would turn into World War III.
Our relationship was like a roller coaster. We had this amazing friendship, but it was constantly peppered with fits of rage.
I let my frustration and anger consume me, and then I would direct it at my mom.
And I would reciprocate. We had created a dangerous cycle, and it didn't seem like there was an end in sight.
What's the point, right? Living in the moment, getting what you want, and then moving on. I had a little group of friends, we were having some fun, and just doing the Jesus thing on the side, but it was all good. Sure, I love Jesus, and I thought I knew what a true relationship with God looked like, but in reality, I was just one of those Sunday Christians. On the outside, I looked pretty good, but on the inside, I was a complete mess. Swearing, drinking, gossiping, compromising my purity, it was all doing a number on me. Even though I didn't want to admit it, I didn't like the person that I was becoming. I felt empty and insecure with no purpose to fill me up. I was stumbling around with no real direction. What's the point, right?
In the midst of the chaos and confusion, God's voice became the only constant.
And through a series of events, Jesus opened our eyes to freedom that we've never really embraced.
When I saw the movie Courageous, it lit a new passion in me to be the spiritual leader of our family. And I felt Jesus bring a new purpose to my parenting.
For me, it was our church's winter retreat for teens. God tuned out the rest of the world and blasted me with His love and grace, and I gave every piece of me to Jesus.
We both realized that the only way we could fix anything was to stop trying and trust Jesus.
Sometimes God answers questions that we haven't even asked Him. I felt this growing pull to go to Bible college, which, by the way, was the last thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to work, I wanted a car, and I wanted to travel. I was stubbornly holding on to all of my own desires. But God has more patience than I do, and in the end, He won me over. I realized that fighting God was just pointless. I kept on trying to run to everybody else, but I knew that deep down, God was truly the one who had my best interests at heart.
The buzz of the booze and the high of the drugs had faded away, and I was left hungover on guilt. I realized how selfish I was being with my choices, and the shame was overwhelming. But at that moment, that lifelong wonder crept back in. Something bigger, something more powerful than guilt and shame. For the first time in my life, I looked to Jesus not as a concept, but as the answer.
Anytime that you listen to Jesus, it's the right decision. Through Bible college, getting the Word in me, and surrounding myself with some encouraging relationships, God cleaned up my life and He completely transformed me. The aimless wanderer just doesn't exist anymore. In her place is a daughter of the King, confident in her identity and uncovering more of her purpose every single day. Living my own way and holding on to what I had got me nothing, but giving it all away to a God of passionate love and purposeful guidance gained me everything. After a life of indecision, exchanging my wants for His wants was the best choice that I have ever made.
I didn't feel worthy of having my prayers answered, but I took a shot anyway. I asked Jesus to forgive me for taking my life for granted, and to embrace His life, and to take the focus off of me. So He did. Work situations that put my life into perspective, meeting my wife Christy and all of her friends who were such a positive influence on my life, and getting connected to this church. I remember participating in church on New Year's Day and being challenged to put God as number one in my life for the year and to watch what would happen. So I accepted the challenge, and 12 days later, my mother passed away. What seemed like a setback at first was actually an amazing opportunity. I was able to spend the last remaining hours by her side, and with my newly found strength and commitment in Jesus Christ, I was able to pray with my mother as she peacefully entered into God's arms. Jesus has been there, waiting for me my whole life. I just had to look up and see his extended hand.
Trust isn't a concept, it's a verb.
We put our faith into action and responded to all that Christ is doing in our lives.
My mom and I were both baptized together, publicly declaring our commitment to Christ.
I implemented family devotions and started looking to God's Word for solutions to conflict and discipline.
Jesus brought a peace and comfort that killed all our stress and anger, and soon the love and trust that we were building with him extended to each other.
We still have our ups and downs, but with Christ as our constant, we can now have the mother-daughter relationship that we were always meant to have.
Word.